Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Society. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had a long day filled with modern concerns, or perhaps you're simply the kind of a person who finds comfort in drifting off to thoughts of genius minds from centuries past. Either way, you're in the right place. Tonight, we're going to explore something truly remarkable. Not a painting, not a sculpture, but thousands of pages filled with the handwritten thoughts of one of history's most extraordinary minds. Leonardo da Vinci's scientific notebooks. Pages that were never meant to be published, never meant to be seen by the world, and yet somehow survived 5 centuries to tell us stories that still take our breath away. Before we begin this journey together, if these quiet explorations into history and science help you unwind, or if you'd like to support the channel so others can find these restful conversations too, consider giving this video a like and subscribing. It truly helps. Now, let your breathing slow, let your mind wander, and let's step back in time. Imagine Italy in the late 1400s. Not the Italy of today, with its smooth roads and electric lights, but a world lit by candles and torches, where knowledge was still guarded in monasteries and universities, written in Latin that most people couldn't read. In this world, in the city of Florence, a young man who couldn't even attend university because he was born out of wedlock would begin filling page after page with observations, questions, and drawings that would eventually change how we understand everything from the human heart to the movement of water. Leonardo da Vinci was born in 1452 in the small Tuscan town of Vinci, the illegitimate son of a notary named Piero and a peasant woman named Caterina. That birth status, which might seem like a footnote today, actually shaped his entire life. Italian society in the 15th century was rigid and unforgiving to those born outside of marriage. Leonardo couldn't become a doctor, couldn't become a lawyer, couldn't enter any of the prestigious professions that required formal university education. So instead, his father arranged for him to enter an artist's workshop. At around 13 or 14 years old, Leonardo became an apprentice to Andrea del Verrocchio, one of Florence's most respected artists, in a bottega that was part art studio, part engineering workshop, part intellectual gathering place. But Leonardo wasn't content to simply learn how to mix paints and create beautiful faces on canvas. From the very beginning, he wanted to understand. Not just how things looked, but how they worked. Why did water flow the way it did? What made a bird stay aloft? How did muscles move beneath skin? What happened inside the human body that couldn't be seen from the outside? These questions burned in him, and somewhere around his early 30s, he began to write them down, along with his observations, his experiments, his failures, and his extraordinary discoveries. The notebooks weren't books in the way we think of them today. They were loose sheets of paper, sometimes large, sometimes small enough to slip into a pocket. Leonardo would buy paper from the stationers' shops of Milan or Florence or Rome, wherever he happened to be working at the time. He would sketch and write, sometimes working on multiple subjects on the same page. A drawing of a horse's leg might sit next to calculations about geometry. Studies of human anatomy might share space with designs for a flying machine. The pages were chaotic, brilliant, and utterly unlike anything anyone else was producing at the time. And here's something that makes these notebooks even more mysterious and compelling. Leonardo wrote almost everything backwards, from right to left, in mirror writing. If you held one of his pages up to a mirror, the words would suddenly become readable. For centuries, people have wondered why. Was it because he was left-handed and found it easier to write that way, pulling his hand across the page rather than pushing it and smudging the ink? Was it to keep his ideas secret, to prevent others from stealing his inventions and observations? Or was it simply the way his mind worked, another quirk of a brain that saw the world differently from everyone else? What we do know is that over his lifetime, Leonardo filled an estimated 13,000 pages with his thoughts. 13,000 pages of drawings so precise they could be used in anatomy textbooks today. 13,000 pages of observations about light and shadow, water and air, birth and death. 13,000 pages that represent one of the most complete records we have of a Renaissance mind at work. And yet, during his lifetime, almost no one saw them. Leonardo kept them close, worked on them in private, and never published a single volume. When he died in France in 1519, at the age of 67, all those pages, all that accumulated knowledge, passed to his devoted pupil and companion, Francesco Melzi. Melzi understood what he had inherited. These weren't just sketches and notes, they were a treasure, a map of how one of history's greatest minds understood the world. Melzi carefully preserved the notebooks, but when he died in 1570, they passed to his son Orazio, who didn't share his father's reverence for the work. Slowly, tragically, the collection began to scatter. Some pages were sold, others were given away. Still, others were simply lost or destroyed. By the end of the 16th century, Leonardo's once unified body of work had been broken apart and scattered across Europe like seeds in the wind. This dispersal would lead to centuries of mystery. Scholars would spend lifetimes trying to track down the pages, to reconstruct what had been lost. Some notebooks surfaced in aristocratic libraries. Others appeared in the hands of the collectors who had no idea what they possessed. 2 volumes vanished entirely, presumed lost forever, only to be discovered in 1967 in the National Library of Madrid, misfiled under the wrong catalog numbers for more than a century. They had been there all along, waiting in the darkness, while the world searched for them. Today, of those original 13,000 pages, only about 5,000 to 7,000 survive, and they're scattered across multiple collections. The largest single collection is the Codex Atlanticus, which contains over 1,000 pages bound into 12 volumes, now housed in the Biblioteca Ambrosiana in Milan. There's the Codex Leicester, 72 pages focusing primarily on the movement of water and the nature of light, which was purchased by Bill Gates in '94 for over $30 million, making it briefly the most expensive book ever sold. There are the Forster Codices at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, 3 volumes containing 5 small notebooks filled with studies ranging from hydraulics to geometry to costume designs. And there are scattered pages in Paris, Turin, Venice, and private collections around the world. Each collection has its own character, its own focus, though Leonardo's mind rarely stayed focused on just one thing for long. Open any page, and you might find yourself looking at a dozen different subjects. His curiosity was like water itself, flowing wherever it could find an opening, pooling in unexpected places, never quite content to follow a single channel. This makes reading the notebooks a peculiar experience. There's no narrative, no clear progression from one idea to the next. Instead, you're looking directly into the workshops of his mind, seeing his thoughts as they emerged, raw and unfiltered and extraordinarily alive. The notebooks reveal something else, too. Leonardo wasn't working within the normal structures of knowledge in his time. He hadn't been trained in universities. He didn't read classical texts in their original Latin until he taught himself the language in his late 30s. He couldn't rely on ancient authorities to tell him what was true. Instead, he looked, he observed, he experimented, he dissected and measured and tested. In many ways, Leonardo was inventing the scientific method before it had been formally described. He was learning to trust his own eyes, his own hands, his own reasoning more than the received wisdom of centuries. This approach led him to discoveries that wouldn't be confirmed by mainstream science for hundreds of years. He understood that the heart was a four-chambered muscle, not a furnace heating blood as the ancients had taught. He described the action of heart valves with such accuracy that his drawings looked like they could have been made yesterday. He realized that fossils of sea creatures found high in mountains meant those mountains had once been underwater, challenging the biblical timeline that most people of his era accepted without question. He studied the flight of birds and designed flying machines based on his understanding of how wings generated lift. He investigated the flow of water through channels and around obstacles, documenting patterns that wouldn't be mathematically described until the development of fluid dynamics centuries later. And all of this, remember, he kept to himself. He wrote backwards, in a mixture of Italian and Lombardy dialect, with idiosyncratic spelling and almost no punctuation. He worked by candlelight in hospital crypts, dissecting bodies that others found too disturbing to even look at. He made notes in tiny handwriting, cramming as much information as possible onto each precious sheet of paper. He drew with a precision that makes you forget you're looking at something created with a quill and ink, not a modern technical pen. The notebooks represent something more than just scientific inquiry, though. They're a portrait of endless curiosity, of a mind that couldn't stop asking questions. Why is the sky blue? How does the eye perceive depth? What creates the pale glow on the dark part of a crescent moon? Can a machine ever truly fly? What happens to the soul at the moment of death? Leonardo asked all of these questions and hundreds more, and he pursued the answers with a combination of artistic sensitivity and empirical rigor that had rarely been seen before and has rarely been seen since. Tonight, we're going to explore these notebooks together, not as dry historical documents, but as windows into wonder. We'll look at how Leonardo studied the human body, peeling back layers of skin and muscle to understand the machinery beneath. We'll follow him as he watched water flow, sketched birds in flight, and dreamed of machines that could let humans soar through the air. We'll see how he thought about light and shadow, how he tried to understand the mechanics of the eye itself, and we'll think about what it means that all of this knowledge, all of this extraordinary work remained hidden for so long? What might have been different if Leonardo had published his findings? How would the course of science have changed if his insights about anatomy, engineering, and physics had been available to his contemporaries? But more than that, we'll simply spend time in his presence, letting his curiosity wash over us like a gentle tide. In our modern world, where information comes at us constantly, where every question can be answered with a few seconds of searching, there's something deeply soothing about returning to a time when knowledge was harder won, when understanding meant patient observation and careful documentation, when one person could spend decades pursuing questions simply because they couldn't help but wonder. So, settle in. Let your body relax. Let your mind drift along with Leonardo's as we turn the pages of the most remarkable notebooks ever created. Let's begin with the mystery that greets anyone who first encounters these documents. The strange, backwards script that flows across the pages like a secret code waiting to be broken. Let's talk about Leonardo's mirror writing and what it might tell us about the man who created it. The mirror writing mystery. If you were to somehow travel back in time and peek over Leonardo's shoulder as he worked, one of the first things you'd notice would seem completely backwards. Literally, his hand would be moving from right to left across the page, his words flowing in the opposite direction from normal Italian script. Letters would be reversed. Whole sentences would seem to be written in code. And Leonardo would be working with such fluid confidence that you'd realize this wasn't difficult for him at all. This was simply how he wrote. The phenomenon is called mirror writing, and while it's not entirely unique to Leonardo, he's by far its most famous practitioner. Nearly everything in his notebooks is written this way. Tens of thousands of words, all flowing backwards across the page. To read it normally, you need to hold the page up to a mirror, where the reversed text suddenly becomes clear. It's as if Leonardo's entire written output was meant to be viewed in reflection, as if he was recording his thoughts from inside a looking glass. For centuries, this unusual practice has fascinated and puzzled scholars. The Romantic interpretation, the one that captured popular imagination, is that Leonardo was being secretive. In an age when ideas could be dangerous, when challenging religious doctrine or existing knowledge could lead to accusations of heresy, perhaps Leonardo was protecting himself. Perhaps he was hiding revolutionary discoveries from prying eyes, making sure that only those who really wanted to read his work would take the trouble to decipher it. There's something appealing about this notion. Leonardo as a rebel scientist, encoding his findings, working in secret to understand truths that the world wasn't ready to accept. But the reality is probably more mundane and, in its own way, more interesting. Leonardo was left-handed, and this was not considered a virtue in the 15th century. In fact, left-handedness was often seen as unnatural, even sinister. The very word sinister comes from the Latin word for left. Left-handed children were frequently forced to write with their right hands. But Leonardo either wasn't forced to switch, or he resisted successfully, because he remained proudly, decisively left-handed throughout his life. And here's the thing about being left-handed in a world designed for right-handed people and trying to write with the tools of the Renaissance. If you're right-handed and you write normally, your hand moves away from what you've just written. The ink has a moment to dry before your hand passes over it. But if you're left-handed and you try to write left to right, your hand drags across every word you've just written. You smudge everything. Your hand gets covered in ink. The page becomes a mess. It's frustrating and impractical, especially when you're working with iron gall ink that takes time to dry properly. The solution? Write in the other direction. Start from the right side of the page and move left. Form your letters backwards so they look correct when the motion is reversed. For a left-handed person, this actually feels more natural. Your hand moves away from what you've written, just as a right-handed person's hand does when writing normally. Nothing smudges. The process flows smoothly. And for Leonardo, whose brain seemed to work in unusual ways anyway, this backwards writing may have felt completely intuitive. Some left-handed people today report that mirror writing feels effortless to them, that it's their natural mode if they let themselves write without thinking about it. But there is another layer to consider. Leonardo's notebooks weren't meant for publication. They weren't formal treatises written for other scholars to read. They were his personal workspaces, his external memory, his place to think on paper. He wasn't writing for an audience. He was writing for himself, and that means he didn't need to make his writing easily readable to others. If mirror writing was more comfortable for him, there was no reason not to use it. He could read it perfectly well. That was all that mattered. Yet we shouldn't completely dismiss the possibility that the mirror writing served multiple purposes. Even if it wasn't primarily about secrecy, it would have made casual snooping more difficult. A servant cleaning Leonardo's studio, a patron visiting his workshop, another artist passing through. None of them could have simply glanced at his pages and read what he was working on. They would have needed to really work at it, to hold pages up to mirrors, to slowly puzzle out the reversed words. This built-in barrier, even if it wasn't the main reason for the mirror writing, would have given Leonardo a degree of privacy for his thoughts. In a world where privacy was rare and every patron wanted to know what their sponsored artist was up to, that little bit of obscurity might have been welcome. The mirror writing also tells us something about how Leonardo's brain processed information. It suggests unusual neurological flexibility, an ability to see and think about things from multiple perspectives simultaneously. This same flexibility shows up in his art, where he could imagine how forms would appear from any angle, how light would strike surfaces and create shadows, how bodies would move through three-dimensional space. Leonardo's ability to write backwards with ease was probably related to his ability to visualize complex forms in his mind and rotate them mentally, seeing all sides at once. There are scattered instances in the notebooks where Leonardo wrote normally, left to right in the standard direction. This usually happened when he was writing something intended for someone else to read, like a letter or a formal note to a patron. This shows that he could write normally when he chose to. The mirror writing wasn't because he couldn't do otherwise. It was a choice, a preference, a habit that felt right to him. Some scholars have noted that Leonardo's spelling in these notebooks is often irregular, creative even. He spelled words the way they sounded to him, mixing Tuscan Italian with Lombardy dialect, sometimes inventing spelling as he went along. He used almost no punctuation. He ran sentences together or broke them in odd places, All of this adds to the sense that these notebooks were truly private documents, written in a personal language that Leonardo understood perfectly, but that would have been challenging for any contemporary reader. Deciphering the notebooks became a scholarly industry in itself. When they began to resurface in significant numbers in the 18th and 19th centuries, researchers had to essentially learn to read backwards fluent Italian, deal with Leonardo's idiosyncratic spelling, and understand his abbreviations and shorthand. Early transcriptions were painstaking affairs. Scholars would sit with mirrors, slowly working through page after page, trying to make sense of Leonardo's thoughts. Mistakes were common. Some passages remain uncertain even today, 500 years later. But that difficulty, that barrier to understanding, has also enhanced the mystique of the notebooks. They feel like treasure that must be earned. You can't casually flip through Leonardo's notes the way you might browse a modern book. You have to engage with them, work at them, let your eyes adjust to the strangeness of the reversed text. And in doing so, you enter a little bit into Leonardo's world. You see the page the way he saw it. You follow the movement of his hand across the paper. You notice where he paused, where he pressed hard with the pen, where his thoughts seemed to flow quickly, or where they slowed down to work through a difficult problem. In recent years, as more of the notebooks have been digitized and made available online, scholars have used image processing to flip the text, making it easier to read. Some digital versions present the pages with the mirror writing already reversed, saving researchers from having to do it themselves. But something is lost in that convenience. The strangeness of the original pages, the sense that you're looking at something that wasn't meant for you, that feeling of peering into a private mind, it fades a bit when everything is already translated and interpreted. The mirror writing is more than just a quirk. It's part of the essential character of these notebooks. It reminds us that Leonardo was different. His mind worked differently. He saw the world differently. And that difference, that willingness to write backwards and draw impossibly detailed anatomy and fill pages with question after question after question, that was part of what made him Leonardo. When we struggle to read his reversed script, we're experiencing just a tiny fraction of how the world must have experienced him. Strange, brilliant, hard to understand, impossible to categorize, always just slightly out of reach. And so the mirror writing stands at the entrance to the notebooks like a gentle guardian. Not quite keeping people out, but making sure that only those who really care, only those who are willing to take time and effort to understand, can enter fully into the mind waiting within. It's fitting, in a way. Leonardo didn't make things easy. He asked hard questions. He pursued difficult knowledge. His notebooks, with their backwards text, simply ask us to work a little harder in return, to slow down, to look carefully, to engage not just with his ideas, but with the very process of how he recorded them. The physical notebooks, origins, and fate. The story of how Leonardo's notebooks came to be, and how they've survived the centuries, is almost as remarkable as their contents. These pages have been treasured and scattered, lost and found, cut apart and reassembled. They've traveled across Europe, been stolen, sold, given away, and sometimes simply forgotten. Understanding their physical journey helps us appreciate the miraculous fact that we have any of them at all. Leonardo didn't set out to create a unified body of work. He didn't write with publication in mind. Instead, throughout his adult life, he bought paper and used it to think. Sometimes he used large sheets, the kind artists preferred for detailed drawings. Other times he carried small notebooks in his pocket, little volumes he could pull out whenever something caught his attention. A bird in flight, water flowing over rocks, the way light struck a building at sunset. He'd sketch quickly, make notes, record the observation before it faded from memory. The paper Leonardo used was expensive. This was before industrial paper production, before wood pulp and massive mills. Paper was made by hand from rags, pulped and pressed and dried in sheets. It was a luxury item. But Leonardo used it freely, filling page after page, because for him, paper wasn't just a surface to write on. It was a tool for thinking, as essential to his work as a chisel to a sculptor or a hammer to a blacksmith. He wrote on both sides of most sheets, cramming information wherever it would fit. A single page might contain drawings from completely different periods, worked on at different times as Leonardo returned to the same sheet to add new thoughts. Some pages show clear signs of having been folded and carried around, creased and worn from being pulled out of pockets or bags to record observations in the field. Other pages are cleaner, suggesting they stayed in the studio, used for more careful work. The pages weren't bound into books initially. They were loose sheets, stored in folders or stacks, organized in whatever system made sense to Leonardo at the time, which often doesn't make sense to anyone else. He'd work on one subject for a while, accumulate pages, then move on to something else, coming back to earlier topics months or years later. The result is a body of work that's more like a coral reef than a library, built up gradually, layer on layer, with unexpected connections and sudden changes in direction. When Leonardo died on May 2, 1519, in the Château du Clos Lucé in France, where he had spent his final years under the patronage of King Francis III, he left everything to Francesco Melzi. Melzi had been Leonardo's devoted student and companion, one of the few people who really understood the value of what Leonardo had created. He was perhaps 30 years younger than Leonardo, from a noble Lombardy family, talented in his own right, but happy to subordinate his own artistic ambitions to learning from the master. Melzi brought all of Leonardo's papers back to Italy, to his family's villa near Milan, and there he spent years trying to organize them. It must have been an overwhelming task. Thousands of pages, covering dozens of subjects, written in mirror script, with no clear organizing principle. Melzi did what he could. He compiled some of Leonardo's notes on painting into a treatise, the Treatise on Painting, which was eventually published and became one of the most influential art theory texts of the Renaissance. But the scientific notebooks, with their mix of anatomy and engineering and mathematics and physics, remained unpublished. They were too disorganized, too varied, too far ahead of current knowledge to fit neatly into any publishable form. When Melzi died in 1570, the collection passed to his son, Orazio. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Orazio was a lawyer, practical and focused on his career. He didn't share his father's reverence for Leonardo's work. To him, These were just old papers left by some artist his father had known decades ago. They were taking up space in the villa. What was the point of keeping them? A tutor in the Melzi household, a man named Lelio Gavardi, recognized that the papers had value. In 1587, he took 13 manuscripts and left for Florence, planning to present them to the Grand Duke of Tuscany. But when the Grand Duke died unexpectedly, Gavardi took the manuscripts to Pisa instead. And there, Giovanni Magenta, a scholar who understood exactly what these papers were, reproached Gavardi for essentially stealing them and convinced him to return them to Orazio. But other manuscripts had already started disappearing. Orazio was giving them away, selling them, treating them as curiosities rather than treasures. By the end of the 16th century, Leonardo's unified collection had been broken apart. Different manuscripts surfaced in different parts of Europe. Some were purchased by noble collectors who understood their value. The sculptor Pompeo Leoni, who had worked in Spain and knew quality when he saw it, acquired many pages and began compiling them into bound volumes. One of these collections would eventually become the Codex Atlanticus, named for the large atlas-sized pages Leoni used to preserve Leonardo's smaller original sheets. Leoni dismantled some of Leonardo's original small notebooks to create his compilations, cutting pages apart, reorganizing them by subject rather than chronology, making his own decisions about how the material should be presented. Some of Leoni's collection stayed in Italy. Other parts ended up in Spain, where Leoni had important connections. When Leoni died in 1608, his heirs sold different portions of the collection to different buyers. The thread of Leonardo's unified vision was being pulled apart, strand by strand, scattered across the continent like silk in the wind. In 1796, when Napoleon conquered Milan, he seized several Leonardo manuscripts and brought them back to Paris as spoils of war. Napoleon famously said that all men of genius are French, whatever the country which has given them birth. The manuscripts ended up in the Institut de France, where they remain to this day, organized into volumes labeled A through M. After Napoleon's fall, most of the looted art was returned to Italy, but somehow the Leonardo manuscripts stayed in Paris. Italy requested them back. France refused. And so they remained, French by conquest, if not by origin. The Codex Atlanticus, too large and too famous to be taken, stayed in the Biblioteca Ambrosiana in Milan. The Codex Leicester, which had passed through the hands of the Earls of Leicester in England, remained in British collections until American industrialist Armand Hammer bought it in 1980 for over $5 million. Hammer renamed it the Codex Hammer and commissioned scholars to create a complete transcription and translation. When Bill Gates purchased it in 1994 for over $30 million, he restored its original name. Gates had the pages digitized, and some of those images were distributed as Windows 95 screensavers, a strange democratization of one of the world's most expensive books. Suddenly, people around the world could see Leonardo's notes about water and light flowing across their computer screens while they waited for programs to load. The Victoria and Albert Museum in London acquired 3 volumes, known as the Forster Codices, when they were bequeathed to the museum by John Forster in 1876. These contain 5 of Leonardo's original small notebooks, bound together into 3 volumes at some point in their history. They're intimate objects, small enough to hold in one hand, filled with everything from hydraulic engineering studies to sketches of hats and horses. And then there were the lost manuscripts, the ones that everyone knew had existed but nobody could find. For centuries, scholars referenced missing volumes, following paper trails that ended in dead ends. Some manuscripts were presumed destroyed, others were simply gone. Which brings us to one of the most remarkable moments in Leonardo scholarship: the discovery in Madrid. In 1965, Dr. Jules Picus, an American professor researching in the Madrid National Library, made an extraordinary find. He discovered two bound Leonardo manuscripts that had been catalogued incorrectly in the 19th century. They had been sitting on library shelves for more than 100 years under the wrong call numbers. Instead of AA-19 and AA-20, they were shelved under AA-119 and AA-120. A simple cataloging error had effectively hidden them from the world. When news of the discovery spread in 1967, the Leonardo scholarly community went into shock. Here were over 700 pages of Leonardo's work that had been considered lost. One volume dealt primarily with mechanics and technology. The other contained more theoretical work on geometry and fortification. Both were in relatively good condition, well preserved by the Spanish climate and library conditions. It was like finding two new books by Shakespeare, two new symphonies by Mozart. The sudden expansion of Leonardo's known corpus, after centuries of fragmentation and loss, felt miraculous. Today, we know where most of the surviving pages are. The Codex Atlanticus in Milan contains the largest collection, over 1,100 pages spanning Leonardo's entire career. The Codex Leicester's 72 pages focus intensely on water and light. The Codex Arundel in the British Library contains 283 pages of miscellany. The Codex on the flight of birds in Turin has just 18 pages but contains some of Leonardo's most focused thinking about how birds fly and how humans might do the same. The Windsor collection at the Royal Library holds over 600 pages, many of them the extraordinary anatomical drawings Leonardo created during his most intense period of dissection work. All of these collections are now being digitized. High-resolution scans allow scholars and the simply curious to examine the pages in extraordinary detail, to zoom in on Leonardo's tiny handwriting, to study the way he used different colors of chalk and ink, to see where he made corrections or additions. It's a strange and wonderful thing to sit at a computer and scroll through pages that Leonardo held in his hands 500 years ago. Pages he worked on by candlelight in workshops in Florence or Milan or Rome. But even with all this effort at preservation and access, we're aware that we're only seeing a portion of Leonardo's total output. Some pages that once existed are lost forever, destroyed by water or fire or simple neglect, torn apart for souvenirs, faded beyond recovery. We have perhaps half of what Leonardo created, maybe less. The notebooks we can study are survivors, and their survival often depended on luck as much as on anyone's careful stewardship. The physical journey of these pages reminds us that knowledge is fragile. Books can burn. Papers can be lost. Even something as precious as Leonardo's accumulated wisdom can be scattered, hidden, forgotten. It took generations of scholars, collectors, librarians, and simply lucky catalog errors to preserve what remains. And in a way, that makes these notebooks even more precious. They're not just records of one man's genius. They're proof that genius can survive, can persist through centuries of chaos and neglect, can wait patiently in library stacks or museum vaults until someone is ready to listen to what they have to say. The story of the notebook's survival is ongoing. Conservation efforts continue. New discoveries, while rare, still occasionally happen. A single page in a private collection might surface at auction. A misattributed drawing might be re-examined and confirmed as Leonardo's work. And digital humanities projects are finding new ways to analyze the pages, using computational methods to study Leonardo's handwriting, to map connections between different sections, to reconstruct the original order of pages that were separated centuries ago. These pages have outlived empires. They've survived wars, revolutions, floods, and fires. They've been bought and sold, stolen and recovered, cut apart and reassembled. And through it all, Leonardo's voice speaks clearly from them, asking his endless questions, recording his careful observations, filling page after page with the contents of one of history's most remarkable minds. The miracle is that we can still hear that voice today, still see through his eyes, still follow along as he tries to understand everything from how the heart beats to why the moon glows in the night sky. The notebooks survived. And because they did, so did something essential about what it means to be humanly curious about the world. Anatomy. Dissecting death to understand life. Of all Leonardo's scientific investigations, none were more remarkable or more ahead of their time than his studies of human anatomy. In the crypts and hospitals of Renaissance Italy, working by flickering candlelight that cast moving shadows on the walls, Leonardo peeled back layers of human flesh to reveal the machinery beneath. What he discovered, and how he recorded it, wouldn't be matched or surpassed for generations. Leonardo's interest in anatomy began naturally enough, as part of his training as an artist. If you wanted to paint the human form convincingly during the Renaissance, you needed to understand the body's structure. How did muscles attach to bones? How did the body move? What created the visible contours and shapes that artists needed to capture? Many artists of the period attended occasional dissections, usually of executed criminals, held in university medical schools as public demonstrations. These were formal affairs, with a professor reading from ancient texts while a surgeon did the actual cutting, pointing out features that matched what the classical authorities had described. But for Leonardo, these occasional glimpses weren't enough. He wanted to understand completely. He wanted to know not just what was where, but why. What made the heart beat? How did the eye perceive depth and distance? What happened inside a woman's body as a child grew? These questions drove him to seek out bodies for dissection on his own, to spend hours in the cold crypts of hospitals, working carefully through the night because bodies decomposed quickly, and there was no refrigeration to preserve them. Between about 1489 and 1513, Leonardo dissected more than 30 human bodies. This was extraordinary. Most physicians of the era never dissected a single corpse in their entire careers. They relied on books, on the teachings of the ancient Greek physician Galen, who had himself never dissected a human body, but had based his anatomy on studies of apes and pigs. For over 1,000 years, Galen's errors had been perpetuated because no one thought to actually look and see if what he'd written was true. Leonardo looked, and what he saw often contradicted the accepted wisdom of his time. The heart wasn't a furnace that heated blood. The brain's ventricles didn't contain different types of humors that controlled thought and emotion. The liver wasn't the source of blood. One by one, Leonardo's careful dissections revealed that much of what everyone believed about the human body was simply wrong. One particular dissection, which Leonardo described in detail in his notes, captures something essential about his approach. In the winter of 1506 or 1507, Leonardo was at the hospital of Santa Maria Nuova in Florence. There, he encountered an old man who was more than willing to talk about his extraordinarily long life. The man claimed to be more than 100 years old, a remarkable age in any era, but especially then. He told Leonardo he felt fine, just weak. Nothing hurt. Nothing seemed wrong. He was simply very, very old. Leonardo sat with him. They talked. And then, peacefully, sitting up in his hospital bed, without any distress or drama, the old man stopped breathing and died. Leonardo later wrote about it with something like wonder. Here was what the Renaissance called a sweet death. A death without pain or struggle, just a quiet transition from life to non-life. What could cause such a death? What had happened inside this man's body? Leonardo, with the permission of the hospital, conducted a complete autopsy. He worked methodically, recording everything he observed. And in the old man's cardiovascular system, he made one of his most significant discoveries. The arteries were hard, narrow, twisted. Leonardo described them as dry, shrunk, and withered. The vessels that should have been flexible and elastic had become rigid and constricted. Blood could barely flow through them. This was what had eventually caused the peaceful death. The heart could no longer pump blood effectively through these damaged vessels. Leonardo had discovered and accurately described atherosclerosis, the hardening and narrowing of the arteries, more than 400 years before modern medicine would understand it fully. He compared this old man's vessels to those of a 2-year-old child he also dissected, noting that the child's vessels were flexible and wide. He understood that the condition developed over time, that aging changed the body's structures in specific, observable ways. This was pathology, the study of disease, being practiced centuries before pathology existed as a formal discipline. But Leonardo didn't stop with observation. He tried to understand mechanism. How did the heart actually work? Ancient teaching said the heart was a 2-chambered organ. Leonardo's dissections showed it clearly had 4 chambers, 2 atria, and 2 ventricles. He studied the valves that controlled blood flow between these chambers, carefully drawing their structure, noting how they opened and closed to prevent backflow. In his studies of the aortic valve, the valve that controls blood flow from the heart into the body's main artery, Leonardo made observations that wouldn't be confirmed until the 20th century. He noticed that when blood flowed through the valve, it created small swirling patterns. tiny vortices on the downstream side of the valve leaflets. He wondered if these vortices served a purpose. To test his hypothesis, Leonardo did something remarkable. He made a glass model of an aorta, filled it with water, and added grass seeds to make the flow patterns visible. By watching how the water moved through his glass model, he could see the vortices forming, see how they gently closed the valve leaflets after blood had passed through. This was experimental science at a level that wouldn't become common for another 200 years. Leonardo wasn't just observing and recording. He was testing hypotheses, building models, trying to understand the underlying principles of how the heart worked. And his conclusion was correct. Those small vortices do help close the aortic valve efficiently, preventing blood from leaking back into the heart. It wasn't until 1969, more than 450 years after Leonardo made his observations, that researchers using modern imaging techniques confirmed that he'd been right all along. Leonardo also described the coronary arteries, the vessels that supply blood to the heart muscle itself, noting how they branched from the aorta just above the valve. These vessels wouldn't be named the coronary sinuses until Raymond Vuissens described them in the late 17th century. But Leonardo had already documented their structure in precise detail over a century and a half earlier. He even noted that when these vessels became blocked, it could cause the heart to stop working, though he didn't have the language of heart attacks and cardiac arrest that we use today. He was tantalizingly close to discovering the circulation of blood, the great insight that would make William Harvey famous in 1628. Leonardo understood that blood moved, that it flowed through vessels in specific patterns, that the heart was a pump that kept this system running. But he couldn't quite let go of some ancient ideas. He still believed that arteries and veins were independent systems, that they didn't connect into a unified circulatory loop. If he'd taken just one more conceptual step, if he'd realized that blood circulated in a closed system, he would have anticipated Harvey by more than 100 years. But some insights require not just observation, but a conceptual framework that didn't exist in Leonardo's time. Still, he came remarkably close. His anatomical drawings are simply stunning. When you look at them, even as reproductions, even 500 years after they were created, they take your breath away. Leonardo developed illustrative techniques that wouldn't be widely used until much later. He drew structures from multiple angles, showing the same organ or bone from different perspectives so you could understand its three-dimensional form. He used cross-sections, cutting through structures to show what was inside. He sometimes drew structures in layers, showing them from superficial to deep, like an animated sequence frozen on the page. He also pioneered what are called exploded views, where structures that normally sit close together are separated slightly in the drawing so you can see each one clearly. This technique is standard in technical and medical illustration today, but Leonardo invented it. His drawings of the shoulder, for example, show the bones, muscles, and ligaments separated just enough that you can see how each component fits together, how the whole complex system works as a unit. The precision of these drawings is extraordinary. When modern anatomy professors use Leonardo's drawings to teach medical students, as some do, the students can identify specific muscles, nerves, and blood vessels because Leonardo drew them so accurately. His drawing of the network of nerves in the shoulder and arm, for instance, is so detailed that every major nerve can be traced from the spinal cord to its terminus in the hand. His drawings of fetal development, though based on limited observations, showed the position of the fetus in the womb, the structure of the placenta, and the umbilical connection with remarkable accuracy. In studying the brain, Leonardo improved on ancient methods. Medieval scholars believed that thought, memory, and emotion resided in 3 ventricles or chambers within the brain, and that different psychological functions happened in different ventricles. Leonardo wanted to see these ventricles directly, to understand their true shape. So he developed a technique. He poured molten wax into the ventricles of an ox's brain, waited for it to harden, then carefully dissected away the surrounding tissue. What remained was a perfect cast showing the actual 3-dimensional shape of the ventricular system. This technique of making casts to understand hollow structures wouldn't be widely used in anatomical research for centuries. But Leonardo pioneered it in his quest to understand the brain. His notes on anatomy fill hundreds of pages, and they reveal a man struggling with deep questions about life and consciousness. He studied the eye intensively, trying to understand how images formed, how the eye could perceive depth and distance, how it could adjust to different levels of light. He dissected the eye from multiple species, comparing structures, trying to find the common principles. He wondered where the soul resided in the body, if it could be located in any physical structure. He looked for the seat of thought, the source of emotion, the origin of voluntary movement. Some of his anatomical questions couldn't be answered with the tools available to him. He wanted to understand conception, so he drew a famous image of a man and woman in cross-section during intercourse, showing what he imagined was happening inside their bodies during the act of generation. But without any understanding of cells, eggs, sperm, or genetics, his drawings in this area are more speculative than observational, mixing what he could actually see with theories inherited from ancient medicine. The same is true of his studies of reproduction and fetal development. He made beautiful drawings of human fetuses in the womb, but his access to pregnant women who had died was extremely limited. So he supplemented his human observations with studies of cow and horse pregnancies, extrapolating from what he saw in animals to what he thought must happen in humans. Some of his conclusions were remarkably accurate. Others were based on animal anatomy that doesn't quite translate to human development. What's most striking about Leonardo's anatomical work is how systematic it was. He had a plan. He wanted to create a complete anatomical treatise, an illustrated guide to the human body that would supersede everything that had come before. He made notes about how the book should be organized, what sections it should include, how the illustrations should be arranged. He estimated he would need over 100 detailed plates to show everything properly. If he'd completed and published this work, it would have been the most important anatomical text ever created. It would have revolutionized medicine, corrected centuries of error, and established a new standard for what medical knowledge should look like. But he never published it. The reasons are unclear. Partly, he kept getting distracted by other questions, other projects. He'd work intensely on anatomy for months, then drift away to study water or light or design a new machine. Partly, the work was so detailed and so extensive that completing it may have seemed impossible. He kept adding observations, refining drawings, discovering new things that needed to be included. The project was endless. And partly, he may have faced opposition. When Leonardo returned to Rome late in his life, he was accused of unseemly conduct, possibly because of his dissection work. The Church didn't actually prohibit dissection as is commonly believed, but there were still social and religious sensitivities around cutting up human bodies, especially when done by an artist rather than a physician. Leonardo stopped his anatomical research after that accusation, and he never really resumed it with the same intensity. So his anatomical discoveries remained buried in his notebooks, written backwards, unpublished, unknown. A generation later, Andreas Vesalius would publish his monumental De Humani Corporis Fabrica, on the fabric of the human body, in 1543. Vesalius's book, with its detailed illustrations and systematic corrections of Galenic errors, revolutionized anatomy and established him as the father of modern anatomical science. But Leonardo had anticipated Vesalius's discoveries by decades. If Leonardo's work had been published, Vesalius might have found himself confirming and extending Leonardo's findings rather than making them for what seemed like the first time. The anatomical notebooks show Leonardo at his most focused and his most profound. Here, confronting death directly, working with bodies that had so recently been alive, he was trying to understand the deepest mysteries of existence. What makes us alive? What is the boundary between life and death? How does this incredibly complex machinery of muscles, bones, nerves, and organs create consciousness, thought, emotion, identity? He never fully answered those questions. No one has, really. But in the asking, in the careful dissection and precise drawing, in the hundreds of hours spent in cold crypts documenting what he saw, Leonardo created a body of work that stands as one of the great achievements of Renaissance science. When you look at his drawings of the human heart or hand or brain, you're not just seeing accurate anatomical illustrations. You're seeing evidence of an almost unbearable curiosity, a need to understand that drove him to confront death in order to better understand life. And you're seeing something else too. A deep respect for the human body, even in death. Leonardo never treated his dissection subjects with anything less than dignity. He wrote about the old man's peaceful death with tenderness. He approached the work seriously, carefully, aware that he was dealing with something sacred. Not in a religious sense necessarily, though Leonardo seemed to have his own complex relationship with faith, but sacred in the sense that human life and the human body deserved reverence, deserved to be understood properly, deserved to be recorded with all the skill and precision he could bring to bear. That combination of scientific rigor and artistic sensitivity makes Leonardo's anatomical work unique. Other anatomists would eventually discover what he discovered, would correct the same errors he corrected, but no one would do it quite the way Leonardo did, with drawings so beautiful they take your breath away, while simultaneously teaching you exactly how the body works. The notebooks preserve this extraordinary marriage of art and science, and in them we can still see Leonardo working by candlelight, carefully pulling back layers of tissue, sketching what he sees, asking question after question, never satisfied, always looking deeper, trying to understand the miraculous machinery that makes us human. Water, flight, and engineering visions. While Leonardo's anatomical work showcased his ability to carefully observe and meticulously document the human form, his studies of water, flight, and engineering reveal a different aspect of his genius. His ability to see patterns and principles in motion, to understand systems in action, and to imagine machines that could harness natural forces to accomplish extraordinary things. Water fascinated Leonardo throughout his life. He watched it flow through channels, over rocks, around obstacles. He studied how it moved in rivers and in basins, how it fell as rain and rose as mist. He observed waves, ripples, eddies, and whirlpools. And he filled countless pages with drawings and notes, trying to understand the principles that governed all this movement. The Codex Leicester, the notebook Bill Gates purchased in '94, is devoted almost entirely to studies of water, and it shows Leonardo's thinking at its most focused and sustained. Leonardo observed that water was never quite still. Even when it seemed calm, there were currents beneath the surface, tiny movements and flows. He studied turbulence, trying to understand why water sometimes flowed smoothly and sometimes broke up into chaotic patterns. He drew water flowing around pillars, noting how vortices formed on the downstream side, how the smooth flow separated and created areas of swirling motion. These weren't just artistic observations. Leonardo was doing hydrodynamics centuries before it would become a branch of physics, trying to understand the mathematical principles that governed fluid flow. He noted, for example, that water flowing through a narrow channel sped up, while water spreading out into a wider area slowed down. This principle, that the speed of flow is inversely related to the cross-sectional area, is fundamental to fluid dynamics and would later be formalized in equations by mathematicians and physicists. But Leonardo understood it through observation and intuition, watching how water behaved and inferring the underlying rules. He also studied erosion, how moving water carved channels in earth and stone. He watched how rivers shaped their banks, how floods rearranged landscapes, how water could be both creator and destroyer. He made recommendations about bridge construction based on his understanding of erosion, suggesting ways to anchor bridge pillars so they wouldn't be undermined by the current. Some of his suggestions were remarkably sound and would have prevented many bridge failures if builders had paid attention to them. In the Codex Leicester, Leonardo also speculated about large-scale water systems. He wondered about the water cycle, how water from the oceans became clouds, fell as rain, flowed through rivers, and returned to the sea. He understood that this was a cycle, a continuous process, though he didn't fully grasp all the mechanisms. He speculated about underground rivers and about how water might be transported upward inside the earth, imagining geological processes that wouldn't be properly understood for centuries. He also wrote about fossils. High in the mountains of northern Italy, Leonardo and others found fossils of sea creatures, shells, and fish embedded in rock. The common explanation of his time was that these had been deposited during the biblical flood, but Leonardo wasn't satisfied with that answer. If a single flood had left these fossils, they should all be at the same level, all dating from the same event. But they weren't. They were found at different heights in different rock layers, and many of the fossils showed signs of having lived and died where they were found, not of having been transported there. Leonardo concluded that the mountains had once been underwater, that the land had risen over immense periods of time, and that these fossils were the remains of creatures that had lived in ancient seas. This was a revolutionary idea. It implied that the Earth was vastly older than the few thousand years that biblical chronology suggested. It implied that landscapes changed over time, that mountains rose and fell, that the world was dynamic and ancient in ways that challenged religious teaching. Leonardo didn't push this idea publicly. He was too cautious for that. But he wrote about it in his notebooks, recording his observations and his reasoning, trusting that someday someone would understand what he'd figured out. It would be centuries before geology caught up with Leonardo's insight, before scientists like James Hutton and Charles Lyell would establish that the Earth was indeed ancient, and that geological processes operated over unimaginable timescales. Leonardo's fascination with water extended to practical applications. He designed water-lifting devices, pumps, and channels for irrigation. He drew plans for canals that could transport goods across the Italian landscape, waterways that would make cities more accessible and trade more efficient. Some of these plans were impractical given the technology of his time, but the underlying principles were sound. Leonardo understood hydraulics, understood how to move water where you wanted it to go. From water, Leonardo's curiosity led him to another fluid, air. If water could flow and be shaped by forces, surely an air could too. And if air could flow, if it could be understood as a fluid medium, then perhaps it could support weight. Perhaps it could lift something heavy if that something was shaped correctly. Perhaps, Leonardo dared to imagine, humans could fly. The dream of human flight was ancient even in Leonardo's time, enshrined in the myth of Icarus and Daedalus. But Leonardo approached it not as a myth, but as an engineering problem. If humans were to fly, they would need to understand how birds did it. So Leonardo studied birds intensely, watching them in flight, capturing them, and examining their wings, making hundreds of sketches of different species and different flight behaviors. He filled an entire small notebook with these studies, the Codex on the Flight of Birds, just 18 pages but incredibly focused. He noted how birds used different wing positions for different purposes, how they soared on outstretched wings, how they flapped to gain altitude, how they adjusted their tail feathers to steer and brake. He understood that bird flight involved more than just flapping. It was a complex dance of adjusting wing shape and orientation to work with the air, not against it. Leonardo understood lift before the concept was formalized. He noted that birds' wings were shaped so that air flowed faster over the top surface than the bottom, creating what we now call a pressure difference that generated upward force. He observed that the forward edge of a bird's wing cut through the air, while the trailing edge was softer, more flexible. He saw that birds' bodies were streamlined to reduce resistance as they moved through the air. Armed with these observations, Leonardo designed flying machines. His most famous design looks like a large batwing, a frame covered with fabric or leather, with the human pilot lying prone in the center, working pedals and levers to flap the wings. Other designs showed more elaborate mechanisms, with multiple sets of wings or rotating screws that would pull the machine upward through the air. He drew what was essentially a helicopter, centuries before powered flight would make helicopters practical. He drew hang gliders, parachutes, even a kind of aerial screw that anticipated propeller-driven aircraft. None of these machines could have worked as Leonardo envisioned them. Human muscle power isn't strong enough to lift a person into the air through flapping alone, and Leonardo didn't have access to lightweight materials or compact power sources that would have made powered flight possible. But that's almost beside the point. What matters is that Leonardo was thinking about flight mechanically, as an engineering problem that could be solved. He was applying the same analytical approach he used for water and anatomy to the movement of the bodies through air. He was doing aerodynamics with just his eyes and his ability to reason from what he observed. One of Leonardo's most famous inventions related to flight was his parachute. He drew a pyramid-shaped canopy made of linen and wooden poles, large enough that a person could jump from any height without harm, he claimed. For centuries, this design was considered impractical, too heavy, too unstable. Then, in 2000, a skydiver named Adrian Nicholas built a parachute exactly according to Leonardo's specifications and jumped out of a hot air balloon at 10,000 feet. It worked perfectly. The descent was slow and stable, and Nicholas landed safely, proving that Leonardo's 500-year-old design was entirely functional. This is a pattern with many of Leonardo's engineering designs. They seemed like fantasies, impossible dreams sketched by an artist with no real understanding of engineering. But when modern engineers and craftspeople have actually built them, following Leonardo's drawings precisely, they often discover that the designs work. Leonardo understood principles of mechanics, of force and motion and balance, in ways that let him imagine functional machines even when he couldn't build them himself. His military engineering designs are particularly impressive. Leonardo spent years working for various Italian dukes and princes, many of whom were engaged in the constant warfare that characterized Renaissance Italy. They wanted new weapons, better fortifications, and ways to defeat their enemies. Leonardo obliged, filling pages with designs for new kinds of cannons, multi-barreled guns, armored vehicles that look surprisingly like modern tanks, bridges that could be quickly assembled and disassembled, scaling ladders, battering rams, and defensive walls with angles designed to deflect cannon fire. Many of these designs were never built, at least not in Leonardo's lifetime. Some were too expensive. Others required manufacturing precision that wasn't available. Still others may have been deliberately impractical. There is some evidence that Leonardo, who wrote in his notebooks about his disgust for war and the destruction it caused, sometimes designed weapons he knew wouldn't work, satisfying his patrons' demands for new military technology while ensuring those technologies would fail if anyone actually tried to use them. His famous giant crossbow, for example, would have been far too cumbersome to be practical, though it looks impressive in his drawing. But other designs were entirely sound. His plans for fortifications, with walls angled to deflect cannonballs rather than presenting flat surfaces, anticipated the star fort design that would dominate European military architecture in the following centuries. His understanding of how cannons worked, how the explosion of gunpowder could be channeled to propel a projectile with accuracy, was sophisticated and based on careful observation of existing weapons. Leonardo also designed civilian machines, automated looms for weaving, printing presses with movable type, devices for grinding lenses, machines for making screws, chain drives that could transfer rotational motion, ball bearings that could reduce friction. Page after page of the notebooks show mechanical components, gears, cranks, springs, levers, all carefully drawn, often with notes about how they could be combined in different ways to accomplish different tasks. What's remarkable is how Leonardo thought about machines. He didn't just design specific devices for specific tasks. He analyzed mechanical components, understanding each one as a basic building block that could be combined in various ways. A gear could be combined with a lever and a spring to create countless different machines. This modular way of thinking about engineering was far ahead of his time. Leonardo was essentially doing what modern mechanical engineers do, breaking complex machines down into simpler components, understanding the principles each component operates on, then recombining them in new ways to solve problems. He understood concepts like mechanical advantage, how a small force applied through a long distance could move a large weight through a short distance. He drew elaborate systems of pulleys and gears that multiplied force, making it possible for a single person to lift loads that would otherwise require many workers. He understood friction and tried to design ways to minimize it, using haulers and smooth surfaces and sometimes liquids to reduce resistance between moving parts. In all of this work, Leonardo was doing something profoundly modern. He was treating nature as something that could be understood through observation and reason, something that operated according to principles that could be discovered and applied. He wasn't appealing to magic or divine intervention. He was doing science and engineering, trusting that careful observation and logical thinking could reveal how the world worked and how that knowledge could be used to build things that had never existed before. The notebooks are filled with this spirit of inquiry and invention. Turn the page and you might find a sketch of a mechanical device next to observations about water flow, next to a note about something Leonardo noticed in the sky last evening. His mind moved freely between observation and application, between understanding natural phenomena and imagining how those phenomena could be harnessed for human purposes. And running through all of it is a sense of wonder, a joy in discovery that comes through even in his matter-of-fact notes. Leonardo loved how things worked. He loved the elegance of a clever mechanical solution. He loved the patterns in water flow and bird flight. He loved the challenge of taking something that seemed impossible, like human flight, and thinking about it seriously, working through the problems, imagining solutions. The engineering drawings in his notebooks aren't just technical documents. They're love letters to the possibility of understanding and shaping the world, to the conviction that with enough observation and thought and work, humans could accomplish extraordinary things: mathematics, optics, and the nature of light. Leonardo's mind ranged freely across disciplines, but certain subjects drew him back again and again, demanding his attention with a special intensity. Among these were mathematics, optics, and the nature of light itself. These interconnected fields, where art and science merged seamlessly, show Leonardo at perhaps his most philosophical, asking questions about the fundamental nature of reality and our perception of it, Leonardo came to mathematics relatively late in his development. As a young man, his education had been informal, practical, focused on the skills needed in an artist's workshop. He learned to mix paints, prepare canvases, create preliminary sketches. He studied proportion and perspective, the geometric techniques that allowed a flat painting to create an illusion of three-dimensional space. But formal mathematics, the kind taught in universities, was beyond his reach at first. Then, in the 1490s, while working in Milan for Duke Ludovico Sforza, Leonardo met Luca Pacioli, a Franciscan friar and one of the most accomplished mathematicians in Europe. Pacioli was writing a book on the mathematical and artistic proportion, and he asked Leonardo to create illustrations for it. The collaboration changed Leonardo's relationship with mathematics. Suddenly, he had access to someone who could explain complex mathematical concepts, who could guide him through Euclid's geometry and the mathematical principles underlying perspective and proportion. Leonardo threw himself into mathematics with characteristic intensity. The notebooks from this period are filled with geometric drawings, constructions of regular polygons, studies of solid geometry, explorations of the mathematics of proportional systems. He became particularly interested in the problem of squaring the circle. The ancient challenge of constructing a square with exactly the same area as a given circle using only a compass and straightedge. Mathematicians wouldn't prove this impossible until the 19th century. But Leonardo spent significant time attempting it, covering pages with increasingly elaborate geometric constructions. He studied three-dimensional geometry, the mathematics of spheres and cylinders and cones. He drew elaborate nets, two-dimensional patterns that could be folded into three-dimensional shapes, anticipating the kind of geometric visualization that wouldn't become common until much later. These studies weren't just abstract exercises. Leonardo used them to understand proportion in his art, to create convincing illusions of depth and volume, to solve practical problems in engineering and architecture. But perhaps more than pure mathematics, Leonardo was interested in how mathematics described the world, and nowhere was this more apparent than in his studies of light and optics. Light was essential to Leonardo the artist. The way light fell on a subject, creating areas of brightness and shadow, giving forms their three-dimensional appearance, this was the foundation of painting. But Leonardo wanted to understand light itself, not just its effects. How did light travel? Was it a substance that moved through space, or was it something else? How did it interact with surfaces, being absorbed or reflected? Why did some materials appear one color in sunlight and different in shadow? Why were shadows never completely dark, but always seemed to contain hints of blue? These questions fascinated him, and he approached them with a combination of observation, experiment, and theoretical speculation. Leonardo understood that light traveled in straight lines. He demonstrated this through observation, noting how sharp shadows were created when light passed through small openings, how rays of sunlight through clouds or forest canopies created visible beams. He experimented with the camera obscura, a device that projected images through a small hole into a dark chamber, and he understood that the image was inverted because light rays crossed as they passed through the opening. This understanding of light's rectilinear propagation was fundamental to his studies of perspective and to his anatomical work on the eye. He studied reflection extensively, drawing diagrams showing how light bounced off surfaces at predictable angles. He understood that the angle of incidence equaled the angle of reflection, a principle that had been known since ancient times, but which Leonardo verified through his own observations. He experimented with curved mirrors, noting how they could focus light or disperse it depending on their shape. These studies connected to his practical work in engineering, where curved mirrors might concentrate sunlight to create heat, or where reflective surfaces could be used to send signals across distances. Refraction, the bending of light as it passed from one medium to another, puzzled Leonardo as it had puzzled natural philosophers for centuries. He observed how objects underwater appeared displaced from their actual position, how light seemed to bend at the water's surface. He experimented with glass spheres filled with water, watching how light passed through them, how it was refracted entering the sphere and again leaving it. Though he didn't derive the mathematical law of refraction that Snell would formulate in the 17th century, Leonardo understood qualitatively how light behaved in different media. His studies of light led him naturally to investigations of the eye itself. If light was how we saw the world, understanding vision required understanding both light and the eye's structure. Leonardo dissected eyes from various animals, carefully drawing the spherical shape of the eyeball, the lens, the way the optic nerve connected the eye to the brain. He wondered how the curved lens focused light, how the eye created a clear image when light from every direction was entering it simultaneously. In his notes on optics, Leonardo tried to reconcile what he observed with what ancient authorities had taught. Some philosophers believed that vision involved light streaming out from the eyes to touch objects, while others believed light from objects entered the eyes. Leonardo sided with the second view, arguing that eyes received light rather than emitting it. He noted that if eyes emitted light, we should be able to see in complete darkness, which we obviously couldn't. The eye must be a receiver, collecting light that came from the world. But then how did the eye create an image? Leonardo understood that the pupil admitted light, that the lens somehow focused it, and that something in the back of the eye must receive the image. He struggled with the fact that the camera obscura created an inverted image, while we perceive the world right side up. He speculated that perhaps the eye had a second inversion mechanism, though he couldn't find anatomical evidence for this. The problem wouldn't be fully resolved until much later, when scientists understood that the brain processed the inverted image from the retina and interpreted it correctly. Leonardo was particularly interested in how the eye perceived depth. With two eyes, we saw slightly different images, and somehow our brain combined these into a single three-dimensional perception. Leonardo experimented with this, closing one eye and then the other while looking at nearby objects, noting how the view changed slightly. He understood that this binocular vision was crucial for depth perception, though the full mathematics of stereoscopic vision wouldn't be worked out for centuries. His interest in light and vision extended to color. Why did objects appear to be different colors? Leonardo believed that color was a property of light itself, that white light contained all colors, and that objects absorbed some wavelengths while reflecting others, creating the colors we perceived. This was remarkably close to the truth that Newton would demonstrate with his prism experiments over 150 years later. Leonardo studied aerial perspective, the way distant objects appeared hazier and bluer than near ones. He recognized that this was due to the atmosphere scattering light, creating a veil of blue between the observer and distant objects. He used this understanding in his paintings, carefully gradating colors and softening edges to create an illusion of depth that was more convincing than anything other painters of his time achieved. The famous hazy quality of Leonardo's landscapes, like the background of the Mona Lisa, came directly from his scientific understanding of atmospheric optics. In the Codex Leicester, Leonardo speculated about the moon's light. He understood that the moon didn't generate its own light, but reflected light from the sun. He proposed that the moon's surface was rough, covered with mountains and valleys, and that this roughness was why moonlight was softer and less intense than sunlight. He also noticed earthshine, the faint glow that illuminates the dark portion of a crescent moon, and correctly deduced that this was sunlight reflecting off Earth and then reflecting again off the moon's surface. Earthshine wouldn't be properly understood and explained by other scientists for another century. He wondered about stars. Were they other suns, vastly distant? Why didn't their light create the same kind of shadows that sunlight did? He speculated that perhaps the stars were points of light shining through holes in a dark celestial sphere, an idea inherited from ancient cosmology, but one that Leonardo questioned without ever fully resolving. His curiosity about celestial light shows how his thinking ranged from the immediately practical, like improving painting techniques, to the cosmic and philosophical. Throughout his optical studies, Leonardo emphasized the importance of mathematics. Light behaved according to geometric principles. Understanding vision required geometric reasoning. Perspective in painting was a mathematical problem. He wrote that no one could claim to understand nature without understanding mathematics, that math was the alphabet in which nature's book was written. This insight, that mathematics was the key to understanding the physical world, placed Leonardo squarely in a tradition that would lead to modern physics. But Leonardo's approach to mathematics was always grounded in observation and experimentation. He didn't pursue math for its own sake, as pure abstraction. He pursued it because it helped him understand what he saw, because it let him create more convincing paintings, design better machines, and comprehend the principles underlying natural phenomena. Math was a tool, immensely powerful, but always in service of understanding the real, observable world. His notes on light and mathematics are scattered throughout the notebooks, interspersed with anatomy and engineering and philosophical musings. Open to any page and you might find a geometric proof next to a sketch of a water wheel next to observations about how light reflects off metal surfaces. Leonardo's mind didn't compartmentalize. Everything connected to everything else. Light connected to sight, which connected to anatomy, which connected to painting, which connected to beauty, which connected to mathematical proportion. Understanding any one thing meant, for Leonardo, understanding how it fit into the larger pattern of reality. This holistic approach, seeing all knowledge as interconnected, was both Leonardo's strength and perhaps one reason he never fully developed any single line of inquiry. He could never stay focused on just one question, because every question led to another question in a different field. Studying light meant studying the eye, which meant anatomy, which led to questions about life and consciousness, which led to philosophy. It was endlessly fascinating, but it also meant his work was spread across so many domains that no single domain received his complete attention. Still, in his optical studies, we see Leonardo at his most insightful about the relationship between observer and observed, between the mind that perceives and the world that exists to be perceived. These weren't just scientific questions for him. They were deeply philosophical ones. How do we know what we know? What's the relationship between the image in our mind and reality outside? Can we trust our senses? What does it mean to truly see something? These questions resonate today because they're fundamental, and Leonardo's approach to them, combining careful observation with mathematical reasoning with philosophical reflection, established a pattern for how such questions should be pursued. He couldn't fully answer them. No one can. But in the asking, in the meticulous documentation of his observations and experiments, he pointed the way toward a more rigorous, evidence-based approach to understanding both the world and our experience of it. The notebooks as windows to his process. Perhaps the most valuable aspect of Leonardo's notebooks isn't any single discovery or invention documented in them. It's the glimpse they provide into how Leonardo actually thought, how his mind worked, how he moved from observation to question to hypothesis to experiment. The notebooks don't present finished theories or polished arguments. They show us thought in process, messy and non-linear, doubling back on itself, full of dead ends and brilliant insights sitting side by side on the same page. This raw, unfiltered quality makes the notebooks fundamentally different from published treatises. When a scientist today publishes a paper, or when a philosopher publishes a book, they're presenting their ideas in final form. The rough drafts are discarded. The false starts are edited out. The reader sees only the conclusion, the final argument, polished and perfected. But Leonardo's notebooks were never meant for publication, never intended for anyone's eyes but his own. They were his thinking space, his external memory, his workshop for ideas. And because of that, they're honest in a way published work rarely is. Open the notebooks to any page and you might find a dozen different things. A sketch of a horse's leg, anatomically dissected to show muscle attachments. A note about a mechanical device Leonardo had seen in someone's workshop. A geometric puzzle he was working on. A reminder to himself to buy something next time he went to market. A philosophical reflection on the nature of beauty. A draft of a letter to a potential patron. Some caricature faces, drawn quickly, exploring how features could be exaggerated or combined. And maybe, in a corner, a detailed architectural plan for a building he was designing. This multiplicity, this constant shifting between subjects and modes of thinking, characterized how Leonardo worked. He didn't pursue one line of inquiry until it was exhausted before moving to another. He worked on everything simultaneously, letting his mind follow wherever interest led. If he was studying anatomy and suddenly wondered about the geometry of proportions, he'd switch to geometry. If he was working on geometric problems and noticed an interesting pattern of light through his window, he'd stop to sketch the light and make notes about shadow formation. This approach might seem scattered, undisciplined even, and by modern academic standards it is. We expect researchers to stay focused, to pursue one question or project at a time, to see things through to completion before starting something new. But Leonardo's mind didn't work that way, and the notebooks are honest about that. They show us a mind that found discipline not in linear focus but in the interconnection of everything. For Leonardo, studying anatomy informed his understanding of mechanics, which informed his painting, which raised questions about optics, which led to mathematics, which suggested new mechanical designs. Everything fed into everything else. The physical layout of pages in the notebooks reflects this interconnected thinking. Leonardo often divided a single sheet into different sections, working on unrelated topics in different areas of the same page. Sometimes he'd rotate the page 90 degrees or even upside down to work in a different orientation, filling every bit of available space with drawings and text. Pages are dense, information-rich, sometimes almost overwhelming in the amount of material they contain. And yet there's beauty in this density. When you look at a page from Leonardo's notebooks, even if you can't read the mirror writing, even if you don't understand the subjects he's drawing, you feel the energy of his mind at work. The confident line of his drawings, the way sketches are laid over earlier sketches, the notes crammed into margins. All of it conveys intellectual excitement, the pleasure of thinking and observing and recording. Leonardo frequently asked himself questions in the notebooks. He'd write nota or remember to himself, marking something to return to later. He'd pose a question and then immediately try to work through an answer. Thinking on the page, using the act of writing and drawing to clarify his thoughts. Sometimes he'd reach a conclusion. Other times he'd note that he needed to observe something more carefully or run an experiment to test an idea. The notebooks are full of these moments where you can see him reasoning through problems in real time. He also made lists. Lists of books he wanted to read or had read. Lists of vocabulary words he was learning as he taught himself Latin. Lists of people he needed to talk to who might know something relevant to his current interests. Lists of materials he needed for projects. These lists are mundane in one sense. They're administrative, practical, the kind of thing anyone might jot down. But they're also revealing. They show what Leonardo was focusing on at different periods of his life, what questions were occupying him, what resources he was gathering. Some of the most moving passages in the notebooks are those where Leonardo writes about beauty or art or his philosophy of how to live and work. He'd copy out passages from books he was reading, or write reflections on what made good art, or note observations about human nature. These moments, scattered among the technical drawings and scientific observations, remind us that Leonardo was also a humanist, someone deeply interested in human experience and expression. He wrote about the importance of direct observation over received authority. He noted that many of his contemporaries learned everything from books, trusting what ancient authors had written without ever checking to see if it was true. Leonardo argued forcefully that this was backwards. You had to look for yourself. You had to observe nature directly. Books could tell you what others had seen, but they couldn't substitute for your own careful attention to the world. This empirical attitude was revolutionary in its time and remains one of Leonardo's most important legacies. He helped establish the principle that knowledge comes from observation and experiment, not from authority. If Aristotle said something about how the world worked, but careful observation showed something different, then Aristotle was wrong, regardless of how respected he was. This was a radical position in an era when ancient texts were treated almost as sacred, when questioning established authorities could be dangerous. The notebooks also show Leonardo's remarkable visual thinking. He didn't just write about ideas, he drew them. Complex mechanical devices are shown from multiple angles, with parts separated so you can see how they fit together. Anatomical structures are illustrated in ways that make their three-dimensional form clear. Mathematical concepts are represented geometrically. This visual approach to thinking was natural for Leonardo the artist, but it also made him a better scientist and engineer. Drawing forced precision. You couldn't draw something until you understood its structure completely. And Leonardo's drawings are just extraordinary. Even quick sketches have a vitality and accuracy that most artists never achieve in finished works. His observation was so acute, his hand-eye coordination so refined that he could capture complex forms in a few swift lines. Looking at his anatomical drawings or his studies of water flow or his mechanical designs, you're struck by how clear and communicative they are. They don't just document what he observed. They teach. They explain. They show you how things work. This clarity comes from Leonardo's insistence on understanding before drawing. He wouldn't sketch something until he'd observed it carefully, thought through its structure, understood how its parts related to each other. The drawing was the final step in a process of understanding, a way of confirming and communicating what he'd figured out. This approach meant that his drawings were never superficial. They might look simple, even effortless, but they came from deep comprehension of the subject. The notebooks also reveal Leonardo's limitations and blind spots. He occasionally makes errors, misunderstands something, or accepts ideas that seem strange to modern readers. He speculates about things he couldn't observe directly, and sometimes his speculations are wildly wrong. But these errors are valuable too. They remind us that Leonardo was a person of his time, working with the knowledge and tools available in the Renaissance. He was brilliant, but he wasn't omniscient. He made mistakes, changed his mind, pursued ideas that led nowhere. Seeing these mistakes makes Leonardo more human and, in a way, more inspiring. He wasn't a superhuman genius who effortlessly understood everything. He was someone who worked incredibly hard, who questioned constantly, who made mistakes and learned from them, who pursued understanding with remarkable dedication. The notebooks show us that process, the effort behind the genius, and they suggest that genius itself might be less about innate ability and more about relentless curiosity and willingness to work. The chaotic organization of the notebooks, or rather their lack of organization, also reflects something important about Leonardo's approach. He wasn't trying to build systematic theories or create comprehensive treatises. He was exploring, following his curiosity wherever it led, recording what he found interesting or puzzling. This exploratory approach meant he covered enormous ground, but it also meant he often didn't go deep enough in any single area to fully develop his insights. If Leonardo had been more systematic, if he'd forced himself to focus on one subject at a time and see each investigation through to completion, He might have published groundbreaking work that would have influenced his contemporaries. But that wasn't who he was. His mind was too restless, too attracted to the next question, too fascinated by the interconnection of things to narrow down to a single focus. The notebooks are products of that restless, ranging intelligence, and they're valuable precisely because they're so expansive and various. Reading the notebooks today requires patience and a willingness to follow Leonardo's non-linear thinking. You can't read them front to back like a novel. They don't tell a story in that sense. Instead, you dip in, explore a few pages, see what Leonardo was thinking about in that moment, then move to another section. Over time, patterns emerge. You start to see his recurring interests, his characteristic ways of approaching problems, the questions that kept drawing him back. And you start to feel like you know him. Not Leonardo the myth, the ultimate Renaissance man, but Leonardo the person. Someone who got frustrated when experiments didn't work out. Someone who was endlessly curious but sometimes distractible. Someone who loved beautiful things and wanted to understand them. Someone who worked by candlelight in cold rooms dissecting bodies because he had to know how hearts worked. Someone who watched birds for hours because flight fascinated him. Someone who filled page after page with questions and observations and drawings because recording what he saw felt essential, even if no one else would ever look at it. The notebooks are generous. They give us access to this person across 5 centuries. And in doing so, they give us something else. Permission to be curious ourselves, to ask questions even if we don't know how to answer them, to observe carefully and record what we see, to let our minds range freely across subjects, to mix art and science and philosophy without worrying about disciplinary boundaries. Leonardo's notebooks show us what an engaged, curious mind looks like on the page. And they invite us to create our own notebooks, our own records of observation and wonder, legacy, and modern understanding. For over 2 centuries after Leonardo's death, his notebooks remained largely hidden from the world. A few scholars knew about them. Occasional pages appeared in collections or exhibitions. But the vast body of his scientific and engineering work, the drawings and observations that would have revolutionized multiple fields of knowledge, stayed buried. Scattered across Europe, often in private collections, written in backwards Italian that was difficult to decipher, the notebooks were treasures waiting to be discovered. It wasn't until the 19th and 20th centuries that his scholarly work began to catalog, transcribe, and analyze Leonardo's notebooks comprehensively. As his pages were studied and his discoveries documented, amazement grew. Here was anatomical work that anticipated findings by centuries. Here were engineering designs that were sound but just couldn't be built with Renaissance technology. Here were insights into optics, fluid dynamics, and natural history that showed Leonardo thinking in ways that wouldn't become mainstream until much later. The question inevitably arose: what if? What if Leonardo had published his work? What if his anatomical drawings had been printed and distributed to medical schools across Europe? What if his insights about the heart and blood vessels had been available to physicians? What if his engineering designs had been shared with other inventors and craftsmen? How might history have been different? It's impossible to answer with certainty, but we can speculate. If Leonardo's anatomical work had been published around 1510, When he was at the peak of his dissection studies, it would have preceded Vesalius by more than 30 years. European medicine might have advanced significantly faster, with doctors having access to accurate anatomical information decades earlier than they actually did. The understanding of the cardiovascular system might have developed more quickly, potentially leading to Harvey's discovery of circulation occurring earlier. Surgical techniques might have advanced faster based on better anatomical knowledge. If his engineering designs had been widely shared, some Renaissance inventor might have built working prototypes that could have inspired further development. His studies of flight, while they couldn't have led to powered aircraft without lightweight engines, might have inspired earlier experiments with gliders and parachutes. His hydraulic engineering could have influenced canal and aqueduct construction. His mechanical components and devices might have sparked innovations in manufacturing and industry. But none of this happened. Leonardo kept his notebooks private, and when he died, they scattered. Knowledge that could have transformed science and technology remained locked in backward script in volumes that passed from collector to collector, admired more as curiosities than as repositories of practical wisdom. The Renaissance unfolded without Leonardo's discoveries contributing to it in any systematic way. Science advanced, but not as fast as it might have if Leonardo's insights had been available. This historical accident, the non-publication of the notebooks, has had one beneficial effect, though. It preserved them as raw documents, unedited and unpolished, giving us an unfiltered view of Leonardo's thought process that we wouldn't have if he'd prepared formal treatises for publication. In their scattered, disorganized state, the notebooks tell us more about how Leonardo thought than a refined published work ever could. Today, Leonardo's notebooks are treasured not just as historical documents, but as continuing sources of inspiration and study. Museums and libraries that hold portions of the collection have undertaken major digitization efforts. You can now see high-resolution images of Leonardo's pages online. Zoom in to examine his drawings in microscopic detail. Follow his annotations. Even view different wavelengths of light to reveal marks and erasures invisible to the naked eye. These digital versions democratize access to Leonardo's work in ways that would have astonished him. The Codex Leicester, purchased by Bill Gates for over $30 million, has been displayed in museums around the world, but many more people have seen it through digital images than will ever see the physical pages. The Victoria and Albert Museum's digitization of the Forster codices makes them available to anyone with internet access. The Royal Collection's online catalog allows viewers to explore the Windsor anatomical drawings in extraordinary detail. Scholars continue to find new things in the notebooks. Advances in imaging technology reveal layers of Leonardo's work that weren't visible before. Infrared and ultraviolet imaging can show preliminary sketches under finished drawings, reveal erasures and corrections, even detect different types of ink that appear the same to the human eye. These techniques are helping researchers understand Leonardo's working process better, seeing how he developed ideas over time, how he experimented with different approaches before settling on a final design. Multispectral imaging has been particularly valuable for pages where the ink has faded or where water damage has made text difficult to read. By photographing pages in different wavelengths of light, conservators can sometimes recover text that seemed lost, bringing Leonardo's words back into visibility after centuries of fading. The notebooks are also being studied with computational methods. Researchers have analyzed Leonardo's handwriting using algorithms that can identify different periods of his work based on how his writing style evolved. They've used network analysis to map connections between different subjects across the notebooks, visualizing how his interests clustered and how he moved between topics. These modern analytical techniques are revealing patterns in Leonardo's work that would be difficult to spot through traditional reading. Modern engineers and craftspeople continue to be inspired by Leonardo's designs. There's a cottage industry of building Leonardo's inventions, testing whether his designs would actually work. More often than not, they do, at least in principle. The parachute worked. The diving suit worked. The mechanical devices work. Some of his military designs, when built, function as he predicted. This practical validation of 500-year-old designs demonstrates that Leonardo wasn't just fantasizing or sketching impossible dreams. He was doing real engineering, solving problems with solutions that remain valid today. Artists, too, continue to study Leonardo's notebooks for insights into technique, composition, and the relationship between art and science. His notes on painting, compiled after his death into the Treatise on Painting, have influenced generations of artists. But the scattered observations throughout the other notebooks, his thoughts on shadow and light, on how to depict various natural phenomena, on the mathematics of proportion, remain valuable resources for anyone interested in visual representation. Perhaps most importantly, Leonardo's notebooks have become symbols of interdisciplinary thinking, of the idea that art and science aren't separate realms but deeply connected ways of understanding the world. In an era of increasing specialization, where scholars often know more and more about less and less, Leonardo reminds us that the biggest insights often come at the boundaries between disciplines, where different ways of thinking intersect and spark. Universities have created Leonardo seminars and Leonardo institutes dedicated to studying his work and to promoting the kind of integrative thinking he exemplified. The phrase Renaissance man or Renaissance woman, meaning someone with broad knowledge across multiple fields, is a direct reference to figures like Leonardo, who refused to be constrained by narrow specialization. His notebooks also inspire simply by their existence. They're proof that one person, working largely alone, pursuing questions out of curiosity rather than for any immediate practical benefit, can achieve extraordinary things. They remind us that great work often comes not from following established paths, but from following your own curiosity, even when it leads in unusual directions. And they're beautiful. Even if you don't understand Italian, can't read mirror writing, don't follow the technical details, you can appreciate Leonardo's notebooks aesthetically. The precision of his drawings, the elegant flow of his script, the careful layout of complex pages. All of it shows an aesthetic sensibility at work alongside the scientific and analytical thinking. Leonardo never separated the beautiful from the true. For him, understanding how something worked enhanced rather than diminished its beauty. As we look toward the future, Leonardo's notebooks will continue to be studied, analyzed, and marveled at. Each generation finds something new in them, something relevant to contemporary concerns and questions. They're inexhaustible in that way, rich enough to reward endless examination, deep enough that we're still, 500 years later, discovering things Leonardo knew that we're only now confirming or fully understanding. The notebooks stand as perhaps the most complete portrait we have of a Renaissance mind at work. They show us someone who was endlessly curious, who observed carefully, who questioned constantly, who connected disparate fields of knowledge, who created beauty while seeking truth. They remind us that the human mind, at its best, is capable of extraordinary things when driven by curiosity and unencumbered by false boundaries between different ways of knowing. And so Leonardo's pages continue to speak to us across the centuries. They invite us to look carefully at the world around us, to question what we think we know, to pursue understanding even when it's difficult, to find joy in discovery, to see connections between different areas of knowledge, and to record our observations and thoughts because we never know what future readers might find valuable in them. The notebooks are Leonardo's gift to the future, a gift that keeps giving, that remains fresh and surprising and inspiring, century after century, that shows us what one human being can accomplish when curiosity is given freedom to range wherever it chooses. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you can imagine those pages. Leonardo working by candlelight, his left hand moving across the page, filling it with observations and questions and drawings. Outside his window, Renaissance Italy sleeps. But in his room, in his mind, universes are being explored. The human heart is yielding its secrets. Water flows in the patterns that reveal underlying principles. Birds wheel through the sky. Their flight no longer merely beautiful, but meaningful, full of lessons about how nature solves the problem of moving through air. And all of it, all that observation and thought and wonder, is being recorded on paper that will survive centuries, waiting for future minds to discover what Leonardo knew. Thank you for spending this evening with Leonardo's notebooks. If you found this journey through history and science helpful for unwinding, or if you'd like to support more content like this, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to Sleepy Science Society. Until next time, rest well, dream softly, and stay curious about the world around you. Good night.